All right, so our passage today comes from Ecclesiastes chapter 8, verses 1 to 17. This is the word of the Lord. Who is like the wise, and who knows the interpretation of a thing? A man's wisdom makes his face shine, and the hardness of his face is changed. I say, keep the king's commands because of God's oath to him. Be not hasty to go from his presence. Do not take your stand in an evil cause, for he does whatever he pleases. For the word of the king is supreme, and who may say to him, what are you doing? Whoever keeps a commandment will know no evil thing, and the wise heart will know the proper time and the just way. For there is a time and a way for everything, although man's troubles lies heavy on him. For he does not know what is to be, for who can tell him how it will be? No man has power to retain the spirit or power over the day of death. There is no discharge from war, nor will wickedness deliver those who are given to it. All this I observe while applying my heart to all that is done under the sun, when man had power over man to his hurt. Then I saw the wicked buried. They used to go in and out of the holy place, and were praised in the city where they had done such things. This is also vanity. Because of the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of men is fully set to do evil. Though a sinner does evil 100 times and prolongs his life, yet I know that it will be well with those who fear God, because they fear before him. But it will not be well with the wicked, neither will he prolong his days like a shadow, because he does not fear before God. There's a vanity that takes place on earth, that there are righteous people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked, and there are wicked people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the righteous. I said that this is also vanity. And I commend joy, for man has nothing better under the sun, but to eat and drink and be joyful. For this will go with him in his toil through the days of his life that God has given him under the sun. When I applied my heart to know wisdom, and to see the business that is done on earth, how neither day nor night one sleeps, I see sleep, then I saw all the work of God, that man cannot find out the work that is done under the sun. However much man may toil in seeking, he will not find it. Even though a wise man claims to know, he cannot find out. When I was young, one of the things I remember most about spending time with my grandfather was we would often spend time sitting together and maybe being in the same place, and we would just sit and talk. And one of the things that my grandfather loved to talk about was he loved to talk about these wise and great men, military men in Chinese history. I recall staying up with him at nights where we would both just laugh and converse about these people who he would tell me about, and just really tell me about their wise counsel and their clever minds in terms of how they won at war. And I'm sure we've all heard stories like this. We've heard stories of different people who have great wisdom. And I don't think it's far-fetched to say that for many of us, we love and respect people of wisdom. From every stripe, from every type of person, from every creed or nation, sometimes even believer or unbeliever, we love wisdom when we see it, and we love people who have wisdom. And we love it from other people because we know there's a universal quality to wisdom. We love coworkers who are wise and who make wise decisions. We love friends who are discerning and make good judgments. We love our children and our wives who can know the right thing and can do the right thing when called upon. And especially within even our own inner families, those who've taken care of us as we've grown up, think about how much wisdom that we've gained from them in every shade and every type in which they've taught us. And I think that the reason why we love wisdom, or the reason why we respect it, is because we love it when people understand the way that the world is ordered. There seems to be great power or great knowledge or great hope when people really know the ins and outs about life. And we love the wise because they can discern and know the truth of something, that they can do right in every given situation, that they always make the right judgment. And we love wisdom for these reasons, but wisdom is also really hard. to give wisdom to give a specific piece of advice or wisdom for all generations is very difficult because there are lots of things that are happening. In fact, much advice that I've heard throughout my life kind of falls on a spectrum between people who are idealistic about their wisdom versus people who are pragmatic, pessimistic, or realistic about the world. When you think of your own advice that you give, do you tend to give advice based on what life should be like? Or do you tend to give advice purely grounded in what works right now, regardless if something is right or not? As we read through today's passage in Ecclesiastes chapter 8, this is the struggle that Solomon has, that there's a difference between what he sees happening in the world and the idealistic wisdom that he has heard throughout all his life. And for me, after listening to this passage, this is the conclusion I think he comes to this morning, and one in which we should come to this morning that in some ways transcends his view, is that wisdom is valuable in our lives, but it has limitations. And these limitations only find their fulfillment in Christ. Let's talk about the passage here. In verse 1, Solomon begins with a proverb. He says this: "Who is like the wise, and who knows the interpretation of a thing? A man's wisdom makes his face shine, and the hardness of his face is changed." That sounds great, doesn't it? It's the reason, or it sounds great because it sounds like what we would think wisdom sounds like. It sounds great because these are things that we want of wisdom as well. And this proverb begins with two rhetorical questions here. First one is, who is wise? And the clear answer here are wise people, right? Or who are like them. They're wise people, these exalted people, these wise men. There's no one that's like them. They're in a class all by themselves. And we as people love to put people like this on pedestals because they seem to know and understand the business of the world around them. And they play a special role because they are wise in our life. The second question, which is also rhetorical, is who knows the interpretation of a thing? Again, this question is already meant to be an obvious answer: the wise person. Since they know the understanding of the world and they know how the world works, they correctly know how to interpret a situation. And this also now leads to how it should make a wise person seem, or how their expression should be like. And it says that this wisdom makes his face shine and the hardness of his face changed. What it's trying to say is those who are wise people are people who smile. Their complexion changes because they know. And I think this proverb nicely summarizes the two things that we probably love most about wisdom. Number one is that wisdom will help us to interpret the world around us. And number two, that wisdom is out there to make us happy. Now, Solomon starts here because this is probably a common proverb that most people know or think about when they think of wisdom. And he's about to talk more about this idea. But before he does that, he starts by talking to the audience of the people who are listening to Ecclesiastes. And he wants to talk about how does wisdom look like in their daily life. Now, it's not easy to exactly pinpoint who exactly is the audience of Ecclesiastes, but I think a good guess would probably be people who are in high roles, who have very high views of wisdom. They want to know how to use their wisdom in the roles that they're in. So this could be people who work in courts, this could be the aristocracy, or people who are just trying to use wisdom to better understand the world around them. And these are the people that Solomon is actually trying to talk to or speak to. This is his main audience. So it's not surprising here that Solomon is now addressing those people in his audience with the way in which they serve kings. So we're talking about advisors to kings. This is the way that wisdom should look like for them. He says this: "I say, keep the king's commands because of God's oath to him. Be not hasty to go from his presence. Do not take your stand in an evil cause. For he does whatever he pleases. For the word of the king is supreme. And who may say to him, what are you doing? Whoever keeps a command will know no evil thing, and the wise heart will know the proper time and just way. For there is a time and a way for everything." Solomon here is a teacher teaching the people of Israel, those who are in high positions, those who are going before kings, of how they are to apply their wisdom in their given worldly role. And firstly, he tells them first that the first thing they need to do is they need to know that they need to obey this king because they've made a promise before God to do so. Now, in the early days, we don't have tons of kings now, but oftentimes when people or advisors come before kings, the first thing that they need to do is to swear an oath of fealty to him, that they would serve him, and that oath would be before God. And so here Solomon is commanding the people to make good on the promises that they've made before king. Now next, Solomon then talks about how should we handle a king. And he says, be not hasty to go from his presence. Do not take your stand in an evil cause, for he does not whatever he pleases. For the word of the king is supreme, and who may say to him, what are you doing? There seems to be this minor contradiction here between Solomon telling people to not go from his presence, to not go hasty from his presence, do not take your stand in evil cause. But what Solomon's actually talking about here is there's a tricky situation about you have this fickle king who is making decisions that pleases himself. How should you, as the advisor, deal with this person? And here Solomon tells them that what you should firstly do is not be quick to leave your office, which is to go from his presence, but neither should you take a stand for an evil cause. Now, kings of this time often had no accountability, not like today where everyone is held accountable in a myriad of different ways. In the early days, most kings did not have anyone they were accountable to except to God, or if they had a God. And if not, then they were just accountable to themselves. And as we know, oftentimes people who have no accountability tend to just do as they please. And these are the kind of situations that many of the advisors were working in, that they had kings that operated like this. And Solomon's word to them is to continue to stay in their presence, but be very careful about when they're doing something evil. You need to walk away from that situation. Now, that doesn't mean to leave the office, but just be careful about when these situations occur. Because you know that he's going to do whatever he pleases. You also know that this king's word is supreme, and that he is not accountable to you. Because you can't ask him, what are you doing? So here he gives specific advice about how to deal with kings who are fickle, kings who want to live in the way that they so please, who may do evil in the eyes of in their own eyes. He tells them to stand firm in their office, be very careful to be in the presence of the king, and pick your battles here. As he says in the next verse, this is what he says: whoever keeps a command will know no evil, and the wise heart will know the proper time and the just way, for there is a time and a way for everything. Solomon tells these advisors that they should keep the command of the king, and by doing so, they'll see no evil, or in this case, no evil consequence for their action. And basically, he's advising them that what they should be doing is they should do what the king commands. He will not punish you. However, he warns them in the second part, make sure to be wise, for there is a way for everything. There will be situations arise in the life of an advisor where he's going to have to make a stand. He's going to have to make choices or say something. Now, something that I find that maybe our generation, or this generation, is not so good at is picking our battles. In fact, we like to pick every battle because we think that every battle is worthy. But Solomon is much more crafty, I think much more wise, and knows that not every hill is to be died on. And that we often need, as wise people, need to know which battles we need to fight and which battles we should not fight. The great example in those scriptures of this type of advisor is Daniel, a man who is kind of elected into the courtroom of the Babylonians. He is then told to administer the office that he's currently given in a high office, and he does so not by provoking outwardly these Babylonians. But we also know in Daniel's story that he also has to disobey. He has to choose to defy the king at times where he is in conflict with his faith. And in Daniel's story, we see a great example of what administration or what advising looks like to fight the right battles and to not fight other battles. Now, for us today, most of us are probably not Daniels. Most of us probably don't advise kings. But wisdom is necessary for us today because we live in an everyday world, and wisdom is required in every facet of our life. In your job, you're often going to need wisdom to know how to handle and deal with your coworkers, how to handle and deal with your bosses, how to deal with your employees. Wisdom is also useful because it helps us to handle business in this world. It's of great value for us to have wisdom. The Bible has a lot to say about our uses of wisdom in this world, as it talks about in Colossians chapter 4, verse 5, walk in wisdom towards outsiders. And Jesus, as he knows what's coming for the disciples in Matthew chapter 10, verse 16, that he tells them to be as wise. He tells them to be wise as, I believe, wise as snakes, as innocent as doves. So wisdom is such an important part of our world today, and it has definite value in the way that we live our lives. It is true in the time of Solomon that wisdom is helpful. It's true in our time that wisdom is helpful. In fact, even in our church today, we still are asking this question of wisdom because we're under this quarantine. But we also have to go to church, or we should go to church as well. One of the major questions that we're working through in this church right now is, what does it mean to be a church in the quarantine? And maybe one of the questions we may have to ask, we continually ask, is how do we operate as a church in the quarantine? How do we honor the government? How do we honor the scripture, honor God by honoring the government as he stated for us? These are all real questions we have to ask as we think about wisdom in this world and how to act. So wisdom is great. Yet Solomon here now begins to turn the question a little bit. Wisdom is great. Wisdom is useful. It has its purpose in this world today. But here, Solomon points out the limitations of wisdom. Firstly, though we will do our best to secure the best outcome by using wise decision-making, one of the problems that we as mortal people who will die and who are not perfect and who don't know everything, one of the issues that we have, as Solomon will tell us, is that we have limited view of the outcomes that will come. That we actually have an inability to know the future, even if we're wise. He says, the second half of verse 6 and in verse 7, though man's troubles lie heavy on him, for he does not know what is to be, for who can tell him how it will be? Sometimes wise men are painted as these people who know everything. And maybe out of their secret knowledge within themselves, they can come to some conclusion that might surprise or wow other people, that they can know something as far as they do. However, at the end of the day, all people are just mortal. They are fleeting. They don't know perfectly what's going to happen. They can make the best decision that's possibly in front of them, but they don't know exactly how it's all going to turn out. In fact, they really don't know the proper interpretation of something because they don't know how the outcome is going to play out. Solomon goes further than this as he looks at verse 8, where he talks about more of man's inability as wise people, what they can't do. He gives us 4 examples here. He says, no man has power to retain the spirit or power over the day of the death. There's no discharge from war, nor will wickedness deliver those who are given to him. It's exactly these types of things that weigh heavy on a person when they have no control, even though they may think they have the best course of action. In the examples that Solomon gives in verse 8, the first 2, the retaining of the spirit and the day of the death, really talk about this idea of we actually have no power over life. When he talks about the idea of retaining the spirit, he actually is hearkening back to Genesis chapter 1, Genesis, where God breathed life into man. And with this life, this breath that he's been given, he can't retain it. In the same way, he does not know the day of his death, nor can he control it. In fact, man has no definite control over his or her entire life. The third and fourth example he gives is that people have no control over the discharge of war. And what Solomon has in view here is that once a war begins, they can't leave this war. They can't leave this battle. They're sold and they're bought in. They have no control that they can leave or stay. The last example in number 4 is that man has no power in his evil to save himself. Because those who are wicked cannot be saved by their evil. They cannot escape the condemnation that their wickedness has earned them. And Solomon ends this section here in verse 9 by saying, "All this I observe while applying my heart to all that is done under the sun, when man has power over man to his hurt." Solomon is ending this section by looking back to what he talked about an advisor and his king. And in realizing that kings are often supreme, and that when people like this, like kings like this, exercise their authority and they do whatever they please, this will hurt other people. This is yet another thing, especially for advisors, that they cannot control. That the powerful, in their trying to please themselves, will do evil and hurt others. At this moment, I want to take stock of how far we've traveled. In verse 1, Solomon gives us the ideal of wisdom. This is what wisdom should do. However, throughout the passage, Solomon now shows us the reality of what we face is far from this ideal. The wise are not exalted in a king's court. Rather, it is the advisor who must beware of the king. But also, 2 other things are kind of flipped on its head. Number 1 is that we're told in verse 1 that it's supposed to help us to interpret the situations around us, to find meaningful solutions. And secondly, to bring happiness to those who have wisdom. In actuality, we actually find that it's quite opposite in Solomon's reality, where he finds that wisdom has some value in how we interact with the king. But we can't know the improper interpretation of how to deal with the situation. Neither can we change the outcome, because we do not have that power. Only God has that power. And lastly, when we talk about wisdom having a smile on someone's face, I want you to ask yourself, if you were an advisor and your king decided to harm other people, would your reaction be smiling? Would it change the shine on your face? In fact, I think that being an advisor to the king, someone you can't fully control, someone who works to their own good and hurts other people, would actually make you quite miserable. And so these are some of the limitations that Solomon begins with. Perhaps the last limitation that he sees is that wisdom cannot explain the reality of why evil people prosper and why righteous people don't. Again, the reality does not meet the ideal. He says in verse 10 to 13, "Then I saw the wicked buried. They used to go in and out of the holy place and were praised in the city where they had done such things. This also is vanity. Because a sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of men is fully set to do evil. Though a sinner does an evil 100 times and prolongs his life, yet I know that it will not be well with those who fear God, because they fear him before him. But it will not be well with the wicked, neither will he prolong his days like a shadow, because he does not fear before God." Solomon is vexed at the interpretation here of how we should understand the ideal of wisdom, which is that God prolongs the life of those who are righteous, as it seems to imply here. And as we read throughout the Old Testament, we'll see places like in Proverbs chapter 3 that God will prolong the life of the righteous. Yet what he has seen in reality is that the wicked prosper. The wicked receive a proper burial. They are praised because they are seen to be holy and go to holy places. And even though they do much evil, they still receive this praise. Solomon goes further in verses 11, where Solomon adds that this person doesn't even receive punishment for what they've done. And because he hasn't received any punishment quickly, they continue to do more and more evil. And yet for many people who are constantly doing evil throughout their life is prolonged. Solomon calls this vanity, and what he means is that this is nonsensical to him. It is absurd that this happens, yet he knows the correct view, as he says in 12b to 13, that yet I know that it will be well with those who fear God, because they fear before him. But it will not be well with the wicked, neither he prolongs his life like a shadow, because he does not fear before him. So here he has it. He has the reality of what he sees, and he has the reality of what he is told, or the wisdom of what he's told. And he realizes that there is this issue here that no one gets what they deserve. Verse 14 makes this very clear, where he says, there is a vanity that takes place on earth, that there are righteous people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the wicked, and there are wicked people to whom it happens according to the deeds of the righteous. I said that this is also a vanity. Solomon knows the general teaching of this topic. He knows that God wants people to live well, to fear him so that they can live well. And that God has said, that he holds that the days of the wicked will be short because they do not fear God. And yet he struggles with what he sees is quite the opposite, that no one gets what they deserve. That sometimes the righteous receive what the wicked get, and the wicked get what the righteous should get. I think for us here, we can see that Solomon is dealing with these two dichotomies that he sees in the world. And isn't it the same for us? Don't we see the same things in our own world today? That we ask the question about why do good people suffer? Is this a question that you've heard in your life as non-Christians have asked you? How can you, who believes in a sovereign God, believe this? People suffer who are doing good. Evil people live long in the day. They don't even seem like they're going through trouble. Why do they flourish? Why do you not flourish? Why do I not flourish? These are real questions that Solomon asks, and they're not just confined to his time period. They're also very real for ours. And these are some of the ways that I can think of that we often think of how we should be deserving and people who are not should be deserving. Maybe there's somebody at work that got a promotion, but they are a morally terrible person. And somehow this person gets it over everyone else. You might also ask the question about how someone around you who might have died so young but who was so good, how could what have happened happen to them? And yet, these other people who we know in the world who are quite evil live to their live to the ripe old age of like 90, 100 and older. I know that Hannah and I have asked this question. We were trying to get pregnant for about 2 years, and we were asking, why can't we get pregnant? When we know that there are these people in the world who do evil and they have no trouble being pregnant. In fact, they're fertile. They have rabbits. They have loads of children. Why is it they have so many when they don't even want them sometimes? But yet we as Christians want children because you said that they're blessings, but we can't even have one. These are real questions that we continually ask. They are issues that you and I face on a day-to-day basis as we grapple with what it's like to live in this world and to believe in a God who is sovereign over the universe. So when we hear Solomon talk here, it's not like it's foreign to us. In fact, what he says is actually eminently relatable today. And the only person who knows these reasons that we've stated is God himself. God is the only one who knows and can control these things. Why isn't God acting? These are questions we might ask. Solomon's answer to the value of wisdom is to correct our view of its limitations. Because man is limited, he can't know what God is doing. Rather, what Solomon is commending us to is to joy and to pursue happiness under the sun. In verses 15 to 17, he says, "And I commend joy for man has nothing better under the sun, but to eat and to drink and be joyful, for this will go with him and his toil through the days of his life that God has given him under the sun. When I applied my heart to know wisdom and to see the business that is done on earth, how neither day nor night do one's eyes see sleep, then I saw all the work of God, that man cannot find out the work that is done in the sun. However much man may toil in seeking, he will not find it, even though a wise man claims to know, he cannot find out." Solomon's kind of funny, isn't he? He definitely has set us up to be set apart like pins. Like he set us up like when we bowl, and he's knocked us down. He started with us this proverb that sounded so great, but then at the end of it, we saw how reality is not quite as great as he makes it sound. Wise people really don't have the power that they state that they do, or that we think that they do. And though wisdom has great value in our life today, and we should pursue wisdom, at the same time, in Solomon's day, there were great limitations to what it could do and what it could answer. The Bible is full of passages about God's will not being fully knowable. And so you can understand why Solomon might feel this way. Elihu in Job, when he was answering Job, says, "Behold, God is exalted, and we do not know him. The number of his years is unsearchable." And we see a similar idea in Isaiah 55, 8-9. "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Solomon here tells them to now pursue joy because they can't know what God is planning. But I don't think Solomon is calling them to hedonism, which is basically the pursuit of pleasure or sensual self-indulgence. What Solomon recognizes is what he's talked about in chapter 6, that we want to pursue these things in remembrance of God and the goodness that he's shown to us. That we want to live a life recognizing that God has given us these days and the ability to enjoy them, what he has given. And that there are things beyond our comprehension. That's for sure. And that we fully can't know God's plans. So what we should do instead is we should focus on the blessings he has given us and not on the ones that he has not given us or the ones that he's taken away. I think Solomon is right here to a sense that for us, we should enjoy these things and make good use of them in remembering God, remembering his blessing to us, and receiving and understanding that blessing. But there's a key distinction between Solomon and his time in redemptive history and us today. It is true that earthly wisdom does not lead us to know God's plans, but revelation does. And this is the revelation that comes from God, that Jesus Christ, the wisdom of God, has come into the world to bring it out of sin and darkness and to redeem his creation by making it new and just. Just think about Solomon's world that he sees. The world that he sees is a fallen world, and one that actually is very similar to the one that we probably envision as well. It is a world that is not only full of sin, but also full of injustice because of the fallen state of this world. And the specific injustice that Solomon labels is the evil which kings do, but also that the righteous do not receive what they deserve, and the evil people receive things that also they do not deserve. This is what Solomon calls vanity. And our world is full of vanity. It is full of absurdity because of sin. Sin is not just the idea that things are wrong, but also the idea that things are nonsensical, because sin itself is nonsensical. This is the realism that Solomon sees and is baffled by. Solomon here struggles with two great gulfs, right? The first one is the idealism, or the ideal of what should be, versus the reality of what things are. And we too might struggle with these two parts of the spectrum. But for us who live on this part of history, this time in history, where we have seen redemptive history play out, and we have heard God's word loudly and clearly, we should rejoice and be amazed that Christ is what anchors us to that which is ideal, which that is currently real. And what I mean by that is because through Christ, this unjust world is fading away. And what awaits us is the ideal world he is going to make. A just world with Christ as king, where he has toppled all human authorities, and the righteous will get what they deserve, and the unrighteous will receive what they deserve. And in that day, we will live with God forever, worshiping him for an eternity in joy. Now, I need to warn us here that everyone here apart from Christ, including myself, is unrighteous, that we will all perish with this fallen world. And what you and I must do is to trust in the work and the death of Christ, that he has done these things for you, that he has died on the cross on your behalf. And you should believe on him, trust in him with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength, that he will save you. And he will make you new. He will declare you just, now and at consummation. Now, I bring up this because in the wisdom in Solomon's time was limited because God's truth was revealed progressively throughout all Scripture. And we now have a deeper realization, a deeper recognition of the glory and the power and the majesty and the plan that God is doing throughout all time. And the way in which God is going to work in our world and why things are the way that they are. And there's this dichotomy now, right, between these two things that he talks about. And the wonder for us is that Christ is that anchor. He brings them together. Where we see limitations, Christ has broken those limitations and clashed them together to make everything work together. This is the wisdom which he has displayed in Christ. So I want to conclude this morning by just summarizing what we talked about. Firstly, remember that when we think about wisdom, wisdom is a good thing to use in your daily life, to continue to see the value of it, use it in your life. The Bible continually talks about how wisdom is necessary for our current life. So use it. But don't always fight every battle. Pick your battles. Be wise. But also know that where there were limitations for Solomon, where wisdom failed for him, remember Christ and think of how he has already made it right. And we should live in the joy of blessing that God has given us and remember him, remember Christ. That where there is a limitation there, he has removed this limitation and has made the wisdom centered on Jesus Christ. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, how good it is to be on this side of the cross, to see so clearly the outworkings of history, to see so clearly your plan for all mankind, and to know deeply how we are integrated and how we work with your plan, and to know how all of these different systems, which we would have no knowledge of outside of Revelation, work together. Lord, we confess, Lord, there are still many things we still will not know and do not know in the specifics. And we struggle and we cry out not knowing about these things, Lord, but we know, Lord, that we can trust you. We know we can trust you because of the salvation that we've received and the glory that is yet revealed for us on that day. We trust you because you know your promises are going to be made good as you've made good in everything else. Oh, Lord, allow us to trust you even more tomorrow, even more the day after. Lord, we pray, Lord, that as we continue to read the scriptures, Lord, that you would build in us wisdom, Make us wise to this world. And train us for righteousness, Lord. And Lord, that as we continue to live out our lives past today and into the work world, Lord, that we would take these things that Solomon has talked about, the revelation of your Son, Jesus Christ, Lord, and make it the wisdom by which we walk by day to day, every moment of every day. We thank you for the blessing of your word. We thank you for the blessing of this church, Lord, and we pray, Lord, that you continue to work in our lives, humble us before you, and sanctify us in your word. We pray these things in your holy name. Amen.